Supportables, we survived week 4. At least some of us did. Injuries were a huge story. So were overperformances. In some cases, ones we've been waiting for all year. Others are just letting us know that maybe now we know what our top guys are going to look like. Not so sure. NFL survived Dublin, or at least most people did. And our league had its first trade in a while. A lot to talk about. League first, the league first, then our league next. Always feels weird to think of, but after 4 weeks, we're over a quarter of way into the regular season of fantasy. So it is establishing what's the new normal. And so as I was up at a crazy hour and was actually watching some of the games at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, etc., just because I was awake, I was noting things down like what's more normal this year and maybe what's a little bit outside of the normal. So just a few things quickly highlighting. Apparently, an American, Skylar Thompson, got jumped in Dublin by some Europeans, some Irish people. Meanwhile, in the U.S., a bunch of the U.S. fans were just going horrible versions of themselves on the Ryder Cup Europeans. I guess Euro-American relations, that's our new normal. Kickers and what they do to the balls now. I don't know how many people know about this, and this is not a setup for a really crude joke. They actually get more control over what they do to the footballs, and all of a sudden, a 60-yard field goal is actually more than well in play, and not just by one or two guys, by a bunch. So I guess just tons and tons of field goals for no particular reason, and teams settling for those field goals. Very much the new normal. Speaking of field goals, we had talked about blocked kicks seeming really, really normal. I was watching the Chicago game, and I know we have some Chicago fans watching, so I'm not going to crap on it. Caleb did not look good if you actually watched the game, but mostly because him getting his passes swatted down by Max Crosby was a massive new normal, to the point that there was a part in the game I wondered if he was going to get another pass off. Crosby just seemed to have his number. Of course, it didn't really matter, and if you looked at the fantasy results, he did all right, and he led the drive at the end, so I guess playing pretty bad for about 3 quarters isn't that bad if you win. Also pretty normal. Speaking of bad teams doing good things, the Giants not being able to have nice toys, that has always been normal. It stinks. They have a running back and a quarterback coming out, having awesome games, rookies, Dart and Scattaboo, and then they lose Neighbors. So even though they get the win, they still get the loss. Giants fans, I think would agree that has pretty much been normal for a while now. Our fumbly Ravens, if you watch the Ravens play, the weirdest team to watch. Their first drive looked absolutely dominant, like the first 3 quarters in Buffalo. After that, I don't even know. Fumble, hamstring tightness suddenly, and they didn't even talk about it. Lamar's just out. That's not normal, but I guess that's normal for this year. Do you start Henry still? You kind of have to. There's a couple guys like that. Speaking of someone that you start and then you immediately regret starting, the Eagles are just not fun to watch this year. That's our new normal. They play the game like Army versus Navy in 1923. It is so dull, and they've forgotten that you actually are allowed to throw it more than 5 yards forward. I think A.J. Brown owners would have loved that one if they can figure that out pretty quickly. Actually, kind of leading off our fumbles and whatnot, I'd be dismissed to say it's not the new normal, but unfortunately, Deshaun Jackson gets references every time someone does something a little bit celebratory at the end and loses it. If you saw Indianapolis and you know Mitchell and what I'm talking about, I will argue, though, he was not celebrating. I don't really understand. He was just trying to grab the ball and stick it out like pretty much everybody else does. Then he kind of grabbed it and fumbled it. It's like if you threw someone their cell phone and they didn't really know how to catch it and it squeezes out. And then once he did it, you can tell he knew he was screwed. And sure enough, replay suggests that was just an 80-yard touchback. So sorry about that one, buddy. Speaking of things that aren't normal, I only have a couple, and you can spot them out pretty quickly. I don't know how many people like watching Brady's commentary. I don't, but I tend to hear about it afterwards. Him making the comment, and I think this is a pretty much a quote, that Bucky Irvin could run with Doritos on his heels and not break them. I mean, that's a weird way to say that someone runs on their toes, but also TB12, you don't know what Doritos look or taste like. You got to be kidding me. He probably hasn't had anything like that since he got drunk after, even then it's booze. It wasn't even Doritos. I would actually say 5-10 years since he's had a Dorito, maybe a protein chip. I think that's what he really was going for. It's just they don't have the same shape. Or let's be honest, he's paying someone to write his jokes now because he knows no one thinks he's funny. Last kind of thing that I thought was not normal, but we're getting used to. There was a massive announcement. It was supposed to be normally the halftime announcement, and I know a lot of people care more about this in some of these leagues than football themselves. Normally it's like the week 1, so you knew something was up. You knew there was negotiations. Rumor has it that maybe it was something to do with Taylor wanting actual ownership rights on the performance, which would make sense. I think it would have been like the 150th performance. All this stuff was lined up. Anyway, it's Bad Bunny, and apparently we had to hear about sourdough and more people getting into it over the last month and a half after the reference on the podcast. All for naught, I suppose. Anywho, now that's only 4 weeks down. Our seasons are starting to kind of form in. Now people are starting to get their tiers. But before we really get ahead of ourselves and start looking at week 5, let's just see exactly how week 4 went down in our leagues. I don't even want to know what side bets were involved here. I don't even want to make any of the references, although some of the better jokes were made this week on the chat group. I'll leave you to go back and take a look. But Kelsey and Mo just dominating. And actually, when we look at it, the crazy part is not only were they running the table here with so many people in the top 5, they had the quarterback 1 in Dax, 5 in Mahomes. They had the running back 2 in Jacobs. They had the defense 5. Their questionable kicker was kicker number 5. But if we keep on scrolling down and we look at their bench, they actually had the tight end 1. That's how little they thought of the whole league. They knew they could have scored 200, and they thought, meh, not this week. But well done. Huge performance. Now, on the other side, Norcan, you actually did put up a fight for a bit there. Matthew Stafford was the quarterback, too. It's not like you had massive underperformances, but the injury bug is just kicking you right now. Benson didn't make it through the game. Neighbors famously got knocked out halfway through. Lamar is really weird. I don't fully understand the hamstring thing. It didn't look horrible, but they're saying there was no chance he could return. They really didn't make a big fuss of it if you watched that game, and you probably did. It was one of the premier games, so I know obviously something to pay attention to. Now, we know you got some depth here, and I'll wait till the end to talk about that one because you're definitely having massive injury issues. Now, you do have a couple quarterbacks. Now, quarterback's not really the position that you might have to fill a whole lot for, but at least you got some with Lamar, and we'll talk later about who else you picked up. But story's not about you. Sorry, folks. I mean, you're obviously doing well enough that you did not score a lot this week, and you're still up there in the total points. We'll talk about another team also in that situation. But the story is our 4-0, number 1 in the week, number 1 so far. How much further can they go? Returning champions, someone's got to stop them. Another team that just went off, Pamela, you had a huge week. 179 usually is our number 1. The bummer for Jackie in this case is, Jax, you were actually the 4th highest scoring, I believe. So if you would have played almost anybody else, this could have been a better result for you. But unfortunately, is what it is. Pamela, you had a great outing for a lot of people. Running back heavy, though. You had the running back 5, and finally, Genty did something to show why he was a first rounder. I don't think we always blame him. The line has something to do with it. Maybe the fact that we're going to get to the quarterback that he has in his team that kept confusing everybody else for the other team, so they just ended up running a lot. That might have had something to do with it. Anyway, we see the range here from 1 to 5 in terms of our running backs for the week. You also have, I believe, the highest scoring receiver, not just this week, but so far this year in Paka Nakua. And that was more than enough. The only bummer for you is when you take 2 kickers, sometimes you pick the wrong one. Of course, you're going to pick the one that might eventually hit a 70-yarder. But the one on your bench was actually the kicker 3 on the week. So that would have helped you out. Jax, you also made a decision that didn't quite work out for you. Etienne would have been nice, but Philadelphia was the defense 3, and Buffalo just wasn't. For you, you did have some performances. You just needed a lot more. Most other weeks, like I said, you're going to come out on top, but this wasn't most other weeks. So 2-2, still up 6, does put you in the playoff spot, so you got to keep that party rolling. Pamela, 2nd in the week, 2nd in the year. It might have been a bummer week for some Swifties hoping for a halftime show, but for Ball Too Well, they finally got on the winning side of things, and with a huge win, 162, great output, especially considering you got this Brown ultimatum every single week, and they're just not doing it for you. You didn't need that as a receiver, though, because you had Pickens and you had DK as the receivers 2 and 4, respectively, and not a shabby outing from the rookie running back on that side as well. Jordan Love also QB4, so you had a lot of people that actually took it too. If we keep going down, though, you also had a rookie wide receiver, or I say had, we'll get to that one again in a little bit, and a tight end that was actually the tight end 3 on the week, and he's been having a pretty stellar performance so far. On the flip side of the coin, nobody was really ringing the bell for Malakoff, so I will say Detroit was the defense 1 of the week, but they're against Cleveland. That's kind of a cheap shot. the grossness of that injury. If you watched it once, I bet you didn't watch it twice. So Hill, you're going to have to be active on the waiver wire. Pretty sure I've already seen you out there and you're making a lot of calls. Taylor had to come back to reality week, but who knows how long that'll last, and you definitely do have some injury concerns to take a look at. So rough week. You could have really deserved the win in a lot of cases, or I should say needed the win in some cases. You almost hit predicted. There's a few teams you would have taken down, but Ball Too Well was not one of them. By far the closest matchup. 1 point is often going to be that. Also a 1 point that, if for those who watch the Monday Nighters, this one decided it, right? We had a couple in the same game here with some Jets and Dolphins on both sides. So we know that if you were watching, coming down to every single catch, that's kind of why the fun part of the game. Raw Doggers, you did hang on. You did underperform a little bit more than Fourth and Conquer, but you still did manage to hang on. No one really had the massive week. Drake London had his best performance by 5. He was the wide receiver 5. And if we look at the bench, some more points to be had, but no one was cracking the top 5. Certainly some people that could have made a bit more of a ding and made this a slightly different outcome. But Raw Doggers, you're holding on. Top 5 is definitely in the playoffs. Fourth and Conquer, don't get too bummed. I know you're in 10th right now, but as we're going to see with the standings, you're not too far off from making a run. This is how close the league is, and this is how good Team Kickass has been. They had a horrible, horrible week, and yet they're still the best of the 2-win teams because of all of the points they've scored along the way. Now, it's not your fault. Your quarterback confused the wrong jerseys, could not stop throwing interceptions for the life of himself. At least he rebounded and got you a few points. He was in the El Negativo for a while there. Monty went from last week having a monster to just doing nothing against the Browns. You would have thought they were running the ball by how much they were up, but having 2 running backs, guess that'll do it for you. And really the biggest one, I think, Green Bay had a monster defense. You would have thought they were, with the trade and everything, that they would have had some incentive to take it to them. Nope, they kissed their sister. They got the tie. No bueno. You did have Justin Fields on the bench. That didn't really age too well. He was the quarterback 3 on the week. For me, I didn't have too many people cracking the top 5. Houston was the defense 4, and that's about it. I just had okay performances and good enough performances. Liked my quarterbacks. They were just outside of the top 5, but not by much. And realistically, I just didn't have too many massive bummers and just held on to just being overpredicted. Sometimes you get those wins. Sometimes you don't. I normally try and spend a bit more time, but with all the injuries and the bye weeks, some people have addressed them, some people haven't. So these are not even close to where I know they're going to be come Sunday. But it is also interesting to look at 2 things. I told you, whole lot of kind of 2 top heavy, lots of ties, lots of movement to be had. But the real important one, we did have a trade. We don't get a lot in this league, so this might be the only one for the year. Maybe not. Maybe we'll go get a little more daring. Ball Too Well, you felt like you needed a tight end, and you went and got one. Now, you had one in Warren, so I'm interested in this one because the rookie tight end is putting up numbers. Maybe you think he's inflated and he's down for a little bit of a downfall. Agbuka's looking legit in Tampa Bay, and knock on everything, he's one of the only ones to stay healthy so far in the receiving core. I'm willing to bet you're betting on regression if you're paying 2 for 1. I do have to say it. I actually think you fished this one around a bit. You might have gotten more than one player, but if McBride is the player you wanted, that's the player you got. Norcam, with all your injuries, I know the 2 for 1 is probably something you were jumping at, just hoping these rookies can hold water. So far, they're both in the top 5 positionally for the year, so could end up being a pretty pivotal trade. Heading into week 5, we'll see if we have any more deals on the table. Not so sure, but definitely a lot of waiver wire movement, especially considering injuries. And do not forget the bye weeks start. First one's kind of a kicker, to be honest with you. Green Bay, Atlanta, Chicago, Pittsburgh. That's a lot of people that are going to be impacted. So we've already seen a little bit more of an aggressive waiver wire. A lot of adds and drops. I imagine there'll be even more heading into Saturday as some of the injuries get finalized. So keep an eye on your roster. You don't want to dip all the way to the bottom. Sometimes it's not going to be your best performance that wins, just you got to get by the person next to you. So best of luck as we head into week 5.